Welcome to Zanaco Unplugged, a podcast that takes you inside Zambia's largest commercial bank, bringing you conversations with business leaders and creative pioneers. My name is Gerald, Soko, your host for the season finale, season 2. Today's topic will be discussing the mining sector. And to help me dissect this particular topic, I'm hosting Patrick Mawire, who is country managing partner for EY, and Zanaco's chief risk officer, Mutisunge, Zulu. Now, the mining sector has seen a lot of developments in the recent past. At global level, there is a push in terms of moving towards sustainable sources of energy. And of course, the mining sector is a key focus area in terms of providing those inputs into a global transition towards decarbonization. Now, at home here, again, we have an ambitious target of attaining a production level of 3 million metric tons by 2031. Now, one of the key issues that we need, I'm turning to you, Mutisunge, is that the mining sector needs to see a particular level of investment that should be able to drive the 3 million ton target by 2023. What is it that you see as necessary for those capital flows to come into the economy? And as you answer that particular question, I also want you to touch on how the mining sector, the players in the mining sector especially, can navigate those challenges just to make sure that we have those flows for purposes of hitting the 3 million metric tons target production by 2031.
So thank you very much, Gerald. So mining is one sector that is very key to Zambia's growth trajectory. Traditionally, mining, I would say, is an anchor sector. When mining booms, all other sectors that are downstream do come to life. So we are living in a very, very critical age. The world is decarbonizing, as you said in your opening remarks, and demand for electric cars, renewable energy is quite critical, and the minerals that drive this are domiciled in the Copper Belt of Africa, that's Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. So to attract this level of investment, clearly the Zambian government has crafted policies, to make it attractive to get investments in the country as well, and to hit 3 million metric tons by 2031 is no small task, but achievable, but must be done within a conducive environment. So we are looking at policies. So a little trip down memory lane is that mining has been quite contentious in Zambia. We've been cited as one of the jurisdictions that are quite volatile when it comes to taxation policy. So I think starting 2021, we've seen quite some stability in mining policies, and that is what has led the capex commitments that I would say are north of $5.5 billion, and in the medium term that should then translate into increased production as well. On top of that, infrastructure is very important. You cannot talk about mining in the absence of the right infrastructure, and that's why you've seen Zambia attracting interest through, say, the rail that is supposed to connect DRC and Zambia to Lobito, and at the same time the Chinese have also come on board to revamp Tazara as well. So you can see that both on the east and the west there is clear interest to move minerals, to transport them easily, and you're talking about reduction in distance from about 1,600 kilometers, because our copper cathodes, we're getting on Zalawi tracks, for example, all the way to Durban, and that was a long distance, but that is actually going to be sort of reduced. There are a number of challenges, of course, to achieve that as well, to include energy. So if you talk about mining takes up about 55% of the grid. And we're talking base load, not solar. Base load, so investments in energy generation become very, very critical. So to 2031, how many years do we have? We have 6 years. I know that the first time it was spoken about was 10 years, but now there's 6 years. So you can see that part of the challenges will be navigating the energy crisis. We are in a drought-induced energy crisis that is obviously getting that level of attention. So by addressing energy issues, policy issues as well, we're making it attractive to get that level of investment. And then we should also not be very inhibitive when it comes to investments. Investors want to come to jurisdictions where their capital is not so much entangled, and then that way they don't get nervous. We can pick a leaf from how other countries, sort of have done it. But in a nutshell, that's exactly what would get us to that increased level of production. Look.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mutisunge, for that elaborate answer. And I know you did touch on energy. Now, when you read around the mining sector, one of the key issues that come out are the high cost of operating the mines themselves. And energy and labor costs are two of the topics that are actually headlining that particular challenge. Turning to you, Patrick, given where we are, obviously a key issue in our market in terms of energy costs globally. Of course, with all the geopolitical tensions, we saw as energy costs skyrocketing and therefore also affecting the mining sector. How do the mining firms in Zambia balance between managing the costs of production and productivity, but also from a labor perspective? One of the key issues that has come out is what you call the brain drain. And that is basically just some of the skills that should be going into the mining sector are transitioning to the other sectors of the economy. How do the mining firms, once again, balance between managing the costs and improving productivity, but also how do they ensure that they have the right skill set to actually have that particular drive in terms of improving production in the mining sector locally?
Thank you, Gerald. So one of the challenges that mine have is the structural challenge. First of all, if you think about it, all reserves have changed. I think mined all the rich reserves. We are now going through declining reserves. So globally, for example, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you probably averaged 1% copper grade, for example, just for copper. We're now down to about 0.5%. So if you look at our mines, our mines in Zambia are around 0.5. The GRC are probably larger. They are around 2-3%. Some of the mines are 5% of grade. So that's a challenge because then it means the cost of processing is higher. The cost of mining, some of the reserves sit very deep. So if you look at, for example, where Kongola deep is, part of the challenge is water and just the geological structure. You look at where Lubambe is, part of the challenge, Shilabongwe, part of the challenge is water and also just geological structure. So those are additional costs. Then if you also look at, you talked about energy costs. We all know what's happening in Zambia with energy. So the mines are having to currently, as I understand, buy energy at almost 18 cents per kilowatt, which is much higher than what I've bought from Tesco. So all those are challenges. You look at labor. You mentioned labor. We have competitors now. So a lot of the skilled engineers, for example, in the mines, are finding themselves in Australia, are finding themselves in Saudi Arabia. Believe it or not, we know Saudi Arabia for oil, but they're also really pushing their mining sector and also attracting skills. So those are cost challenges. And I think to balance that is almost a long-term view. And I think it's balancing your stakeholders as mining companies. Mutisunge spoke about capital. One of the big pressures that obviously mining company has is the returns to shareholders. And I think one of the key perspectives that shareholders in mines must have is to have a long-term view and to understand that you will not get the 5-year return or 6-year return. If you want to invest in copper in Zambia, you're probably looking north of 10 years in terms of the investment horizon. So your decision making, how you view the cost we are talking about, and how you structure your operations also changes. But it also means that, for example, the ones that are joining the industry now needs to invest a lot more in technology, digital. Mines are not known for being technology heavy, but I think a lot of mining companies are changing their approach. The older ones are probably unlucky because they've designed their mines in a different way, but the newer ones are more privileged because they can do a ground-up design, which is more cost-efficient than technology heavy.
Thank you so much. So you did touch on
very key elements as regards the mining sector. So I know we've looked at for the cost side, but also the investment side. In the 2025 national budget in Mutisunge, one of the things government is looking at doing is to establish a stabilization fund. And this is coming on the back of the fact that shocks have tended to disturb the budget execution for this particular country. And the design of it is that the resources into that particular fund is supposed to come from proceeds from the mining sector, specifically excess collections in terms of royalty taxes. I just want to understand from where you sit in Sunday, how important is the stabilization fund Zambia is seeking to establish, but also do you think that relying on excess mineral collections is enough commitment on the part of government as regards preparedness for future adverse events?
Thank you, Gerald. Importance of a stabilization fund, very, very important. The best stabilization funds, if I pick a leaf from a number of nations that have them, can look at especially commodity driven nations, the likes of Angola. These are built in years of plenty when you're enjoying high exports of crude, high exports of copper, and the prices are quite healthy. So in years of plenty, it's like a savings culture. You save your excess for a rainy day, For Zambia, great initiative, yes. Though the timing may be a bit challenging, we are in the labyrinth of, I would say, debt restructure on the tail end. But at the same time, we recently restructured our bonds. We need resources to pay debt. Sectors of the economy have to grow, and the economy has to grow eventually to dwarf all these obligations that we have as a nation. So I can understand the usage of mining as a sector through mineral royalties to maximize and then have that excess capacity go into a stabilization fund, because we're even in a drought era where the drought shock impact was calculated at about $940 million, and we needed to plug that hole. And it's got implications that you've seen on the economy. And if we did have a stabilization fund, part of those shocks that Zambia has experienced would have been cushioned, and we wouldn't have felt or borne the brunt of the drought as much as we have right now. So is that the best option? I would say mining for us is very critical, and it is believed that more can actually be, benefited from that sector. And I'm actually even thinking of increasing the number of mines, which is the first point of call. There's quite a lot of exploration that is happening right now, and if we can have more mines opened, the size of the FQMs, then it does make sense to go that route as well. It also speaks to I would say not only mineral royalties, but it also speaks to ownership of some of the mines. The more mines you have, if ownership can also increase, because I think one problem we've had since 1964 is that we've always been on the receiving end of the hard bargain, where ownership may not have been maximized. We could have actually done better in the way deals were being structured, but the greater the ownership, then the greater the benefit you are getting from mining in terms of when prices are up, when dividends are being paid. Then I think we have a stronger base to have more resources into those areas. And not just mining, let's look at other sectors as well. We could be thinking of ramping up our agriculture. Look at how much agriculture contributes to GDP. I mean, it's calculated as 3 to 3.5%. If we could increase that to above 30%, you can imagine how much in excess we would have. These stabilization funds become very critical in times of, say, disaster, calamity strikes, or if we need to stabilize and then we run out of, we've got FX swings and all. It makes sense to dip into, those funds. So it's a great initiative. My only plea would be that when you start a fund like that, there has to be discipline. You can't set up those funds and then along the line start to divert, and then it defeats the whole purpose of having that. Very, very similar concept to having a sinking fund. So these pronouncements, great. I think it would make a stronger case if they were followed up with actualization and keeping funds and committing a portion to them. But I would say, I'll reiterate that they work best in years of plenty so that you can start to cushion. But where we are right now, I believe that Zambia has this chance to still build a fund, especially if we hit that 3 million metric tons. I mean, we are only hitting what about 700 to about 850,000. How much more if we hit 3 million metric tons? You would then definitely have a strong case to build a fund. So it's a great idea, but I think that it requires discipline and a follow through to ensure that we are building those reserves.
Thank you, Mutisunge, for your thoughts. I know obviously predictions are indicating that going forward, these are some of the challenges we'll be facing as regards shocks with higher intensity, but at the same time higher frequency. In closing, I'll turn to you, Patrick. Now, one of the things that we've seen in different sectors, not just in the mining sector, is greater scrutiny in terms of how businesses conduct themselves in terms of operation. One of the big issues at the moment is the environmental and social governance issues. Now, increased appetite in terms of investment into the mining sector of Zambia. How do the firms balance in terms of ensuring that they have adequate frameworks in place to make sure that these things around environmental and social governance are actually in place to the extent that the local environment, but also the external environment is satisfied with the conduct of business for the mining firms? Thank you very much, Gerald. So, one of the most important things, obviously, is mining is a legacy industry, meaning it leaves a footprint. So when mining occurs, you will see either a big hole or a big dam. Tailings like Black Mountain, for example, or on the copper belt. So it does leave a footprint, and there are areas that mining companies must manage to just make sure that there's that harmony between the communities where they operate and the company itself. Because it doesn't help. I think we followed the news, for example, in Panama, with the mines there in Brazil, the infamous, Red Dam collapse where many people lost their lives and so on. That does leave a bitter taste in communities. So it's important that mining companies balance the needs. Obviously, opportunity is great. I mean, we are looking at, for example, copper, where we are told to satisfy demand in the next 25 years, we need 40 mines that produce 300,000 tons across the globe. And that's when mining will be able to get it. So the demand is great. And with a great opportunity, obviously, there's a temptation to just be out there and make your money and leave. But the most important thing that mining companies do, for the older ones, is probably a bit more difficult. The newer ones is to make sure that that responsibility and governance is designed in the mine from the word go. So from the time you do exploration, you must have, sustainability in mind. You must have, climate change in mind. You must have waste management in mind. So where do you dump your tailings, for example? How do you treat your water resources, the water sources that are near you, pollution of water sources? That all should be thought through from the beginning. For the ones that are already operating, it's also an important conversation, one of which is, at what level is your governance around environmental and social issues? How do you interact with the community? What legacy do you leave with the community? I think one of the things that you find out when you visit mining town these days is the comparison between, the legacy of ZCCM mines, their sporting activities, their social engagement, and so on. And the newer ones, there's a big difference. And I think you do get that feedback quite a lot when you interact with the people that live in mining town. And I think you would have heard the Minister of Mines, for example, re-emphasizing that point. They want mines to have a better footprint and to have better engagement. So the boards of mining companies must engage at that level. It shouldn't just be left to some corner office somewhere. No, we have an environmental officer and so on. What do they call them in other roles? They call them, social, corporate governance specialists or government affairs director. So on all those roles. so that, social responsibilities are signed in a corner, rather than taken up at board level as a strategic imperative. Because if you look at license to operate goes with your social and governance principles as a business. Otherwise, if you end up, for example, with some of these stories we've heard, Australia, where, a mining company went and mined in tribal lands, for example, that brought a conflict with the residents of that area. I've mentioned Brazil, I've mentioned Panama. In the end, you find you can't run a project, your project is delayed. So you're better off dealing with those issues upfront. And the boards must recognize those are strategic imperatives. They are not issues that you assign to an officer somewhere. So I think in terms of engaging around social issues, engaging around the environment, mining companies must elevate that conversation to the highest level and have it in their plan, in their strategy, so that it's not just a by the way, we are mining, but we're also doing it. But it should be a conversation where they say we are mining as a socially responsible business.
So we have come to the end of our podcast. En route to the 2031 target of producing 3 million tons, we've been discussing the outlook of the mining sector in Zambia. I've been your host, Gerald Soko, for the season finale, season 2. Until next time, it's bye for now.